Black history in the making.
It's something, number one, that's never been done in Youngstown before.
Marketing businesses that are sometimes overlooked.
It has been needed in the Valley for a long time.
It's called the Youngstown Black Business Directory.
It's a directory of local Black and minority businesses.
That's Charles Colvin. He and his business partner, Arthur Ward, started the directory.
To shed light on them and just to start like an entrepreneurship hub.
That hub is on their webpage, youngstownblackbusinessdirectory.com, allowing any Black or minority-owned business to register on their site, bringing notoriety.
A lot of Black businesses don't get the press releases when they open up. They don't get the ribbon cutting.
And knowledge.
A lot of companies don't know that I need to get a write-up.
To companies for free.
Exposure is the most important thing.
A luxury barbershop owner, Keelan Bilal, didn't have when he first started in 2013.
There were still a lot of people that didn't know exactly where we were.
Any Black business that opens up, every person should know about it.
A problem the Black Business Directory now solves.
This or assist getting the word out there, information, address.
Early on, if we would have had that type of directory, I think a lot more people would have known exactly where we were.
Kingly Hand Wash and Wax owner Julius Oliver had a hard time bridging the gap between customers and his business in the beginning.
I had to wait for them to come in, and word of mouth is great, but being able to find your business somewhere is even better.
The Youngstown Black Business Directory stands in between that gap, making it easier to support Black-owned businesses.
You can open it up just to be curious about what's in it and end up seeing the business that you're looking for.
According to Nielsen, last year, Black consumers spent $1.2 trillion nationally, and out of every dollar that was spent, only 2 cents went back to Black businesses.
So that's a major problem amongst our community.
With the businesses they plan to register, it could change those statistics and help the economic landscape in the Valley.
If we at least generate $1,000 extra for each of those businesses, that's $3 million, which is a huge boom for economic development.
Opening the doors for more jobs.
Black businesses will stay around longer.
And businesses in our community.
What CHIP has done is basically solved a problem of being able to find Black businesses.
Young entrepreneurs.
We're just trying to do our part.
Leaving their names in the Valley's modern Black history.
When you walk into this building, it's like walking into history.
The oldest Black Baptist church in Trumbull County.
This church was their safe place.
Spiritual home to thousands of people for over a century.
There is a deep, deep legacy.
Warren's Second Baptist Church was founded in 1916 and built by former slaves. This is the original Second Baptist building, and this is the new one.
Most of the residents of this area came from down south.
A trend that continued for decades. Black families looking to escape the Jim Crow laws of the South found a home in Second Baptist.
Many of our families come here from Mississippi, Louisiana.
Thomasville, Georgia.
That's Agnes Bryant. Her family left Georgia in 1938 to start a new life in Warren, Ohio.
When you moved into this new town, this new place called Warren, and you're looking for something that's familiar, Second Baptist Church was one of those places.
My aunt was an usher at this church.
And her whole family attended, escaping the physical laws of Jim Crow. Warren didn't have signs saying for colored or for whites.
But they may as well have them there.
Because escaping the unfair practices of racial segregation wasn't so easy.
Now there's a pizza shop that was right across the street. Now the white kids could go, but we weren't allowed over there.
Making it hard to tell the difference from the South and the North.
I mean, they were just had open with it.
Brian and many other Black families knew only one place where they wouldn't feel second class.
The church becomes that place.
Todd Johnson is the lead pastor of Second Baptist.
You're instantly able to connect with families who look like you, who've had the same experiences you've had.
And anyone who sat in the pews of Second Baptist,
they were safe, they were loved, they were important,
was showered with positive reinforcement.
They were truly God's children, and that their Black was beautiful.
Words that resonated with the neighbors, making Second Baptist a pillar of the Black community, gaining notoriety. Even famous civil rights leaders stopped by.
We had Martin Luther King Sr. here at our church.
Brian told me when King spoke, the church was so packed you had to stand up. which was almost as big of a crowd when Mahalia Jackson, a famous gospel singer, sang for their benefit concert.
So we stand in the legacy of Black history in Trumbull County, not just being the first Black Baptist church in Trumbull County, but always being involved and influential.
Although times have changed,
there are issues today that still signify the struggle that continues for African Americans.
Second Baptist Church hasn't.
We're required to use our organizational and our spiritual force and might to try to speak for those who can't speak for themselves and to provide a greater voice for justice in our community.
Through worship, prayer, and action. The Strockstone House
was built in 1831.
An historic landmark.
This farm here was like 250 acres at one time.
With the creek right next door.
And there were no neighbors out here.
Conditions that made the house perfect to have an Underground Railroad station in the basement.
Every once in a while, someone will say, my great-great-great-grandpa said it was part of the Underground Railroad.
For decades, Joyce Pogamy has conducted tours of the Strock House, not knowing for sure if there used to be an Underground Railroad right beneath her feet.
So then I wrote to Columbus, to the Underground Railroad Association.
And they were just as curious as her, so they sent her this book and this map of the Underground Railroad.
This map behind me shows the outline of the Underground Railroad in Ohio, each red line showing the route and each dot showing where they could go. The one is in Austintown.
None of the map has addresses. It just says Austintown.
The Underground Railroad Association told me they didn't have any addresses because the journey to freedom was life or death for slaves and people who helped.
It wasn't very acceptable.
In fact, it was against federal law in 1850 to help slaves escape. Anyone who did faced legal and sometimes social consequences. So most shelters didn't keep record of their address and who came, making it hard to find concrete evidence for any stops on the Underground Railroad in Ohio.
Then we had some real history buffs with the Underground Railroad come out, and they said that they thought they may have come from a boat.
This big lake used to be a creek during slavery times.
And that's where they could travel.
In a boat, making it easier to not be seen by slave catchers.
And they could have traveled at night, so they would maybe come up the hill, come in that back door, and then stay here in the basement. This was the only room that they had.
The North Star led the slaves to freedom, but quilts guided them.
If it was an Underground Railroad, they would hang quilts. If there was an arrow right in the middle of it, it meant go straight for the next Underground Railroad.
She showed me one quilt she had upstairs.
And this is the quilt.
That could have helped lead slaves to freedom.
This could be very well be a signature. That's what the man said, because they didn't read or write back then.
So they put stars signifying that they made it to the stop, possibly letting other slaves know it was safe to come to that house.
And these quilts hung outside all summer.
The road to freedom, such a guarded secret that history isn't sure is stopped at the Strock House.
The history buffs from years and years and years ago always said this was part of the Underground Railroad.
But it shows that black history could be hidden right beneath your feet. By his sophomore year in high school, Tamron Smith's football career started to take shape.
2 minutes left in the game, they gave me a chance to play fullback. I scored a 25-yard touchdown, and the head coach was like, why this kid ain't playing?
Becoming the first person in Youngstown South High School's history to rush for 1,000 yards. Games like this landed him in front of college coaches, earning a scholarship to YSU.
YSU was like a turning point of everything.
Tamron Smith capped a 79-yard drive with his 51st career TD.
Winning national championships in 1991 and 93, but he never prepared for life after football.
School wasn't never a part of what I wanted to do. I just love playing football.
You need plan B, no matter how good you are.
That's Dr. Jack Lessig, a former sports psychologist for the Cleveland Cavaliers. He treated players at all levels of sports.
Those who were smart enough to have a plan B are going to be better off.
I quit school in '93. I quit. I'm thinking that NFL dream gonna happen.
Dr. Lessig says in high school, athletes have an unreasonable expectation of turning pro. 30% of white high school players compared to 60% of black players think they're going to turn pro. But only 4% of high school players even make it to college sports. Smith was a part of that 4%.
It was a blessing.
Beating those stats, Smith got a chance with the Cleveland Browns.
I survived about 2 cuts, and then they got me up out of there.
Running out of time and opportunities, the Washington Redskins offered Smith one last shot.
I tweaked my knee a little bit. I said, Coach, I really can't run right now. He said, son, you can't make the club in the tub. Gotta let you go.
Smith still dreamed for one more shot at the pros.
2 months later, I get shot in the head. That's where my football career died at.
Someone shot Smith less than 5 miles from where he found glory at YSU Stadium.
I haven't been over here at all. In 20 years, since 1995.
Smith told me he went to a bar and his friends got into a fight that spilled outside where he was standing.
One guy punches me, another guy comes over his shoulder with a gun. Boom, 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 started shooting at me.
That's when his football instincts kicked in.
All I remember was just running, going over cars.
The bullet went through the right side of his skull and out of his eye. Doctors saved his life, but couldn't save his football career.
When I'm in the hospital, man, I know everything over. You know, doctor says you're gonna lose your eye.
To Smith, no eye, no football meant he no longer had an identity.
Those who only have that identity as an athlete are going to be devastated.
That was rock bottom. You just feel so terrible, man, about losing everything and not getting to the apex that you wanted to get to.
Then Smith had no job and no plan B.
You just don't find yourself in 10 minutes or 2 months or 6 weeks or a couple days. It takes a while.
Although football was taken from him,
I can focus on my education. I ended up graduating.
Skills that helped him.
I knew I started liking to work with kids, so that was my future, and that's what I did.
Particularly young athletes.
When you're young and you have no plan, you think life is going to be forever. You're going to think these situations last forever. You're going to think that football is going to last forever.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous I Have a Dream speech drew the blueprints for a better tomorrow.
I think that the building blocks are in place.
Dr. King helped set the foundation to end discrimination in America, and these 5 students at MCCTC are still laying the bricks.
I think as long as there's still people who are trying to piece them together, that it can come to an end eventually.
Brianna Rotuno, Anna Chain, Avery Sandy, Juliana Schuld, and Ani McCabe are high school juniors. Each of them has seen discrimination. Juliana Schuld told me her class went on an overnight field trip and she had a friend with a disability.
This girl said she didn't want a room with her because she had a disability.
Hearing those words made her think of what she learned from Dr. King.
Martin Luther King Jr. taught us that even though no matter what your skin color is, we're all the same inside.
And made her think of what Dr. King would say in that situation.
Oh, she might have a disability, but you know, she's still human.
A lesson Dr. King taught all 5 students is a message they all want to spread.
We kept brainstorming about how to show that we want to raise awareness in our whole school and everywhere.
That's when they heard of a competition by the Ohio Civil Rights Commission, asking Ohio high school students how they can push Dr. King's legacy forward.
The kids could do anything they wanted, from designing a poster to something more multimedia.
Sharon Jones is their visual arts teacher. They decided to spread Dr. King's message through this video, followed by this important question. What more can or will you do to continue Dr. Martin Luther King's fight for equality and justice? Each person showing what they will do to keep Dr. King's legacy alive.
It's my favorite way to educate people because I think, especially with art, it's just such a unique way to get people to really feel an emotion.
Every time I watch it, you know, I get a little choked up because it's really heartfelt.
It was that emotion that helped them in the competition.
I knew the video was good.
To take home first place.
I was beyond proud of them. I know how hard they worked.
It took us a long time to put it together and make it look really good.
The dedication from all 5 students will earn them a trip to Columbus to be honored for their video by the Ohio Civil Rights Commission.
I never really expected it to go this far, but we're really happy it did.
A message that's traveled from Washington, D.C. in 1963 to these 5 students from Ohio in 2019.